Good afternoon. Welcome to the DTV Audio Group Audio Production Virtualization Contribution Forum. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. And thanks for SVG and for our sponsors for helping us put this event together. And thanks for everybody individually who's helped with this. We're going to talk a little bit today about sort of emerging trends in audio production. There's certainly been a lot of discussion about ways in which ways in which this is evolving in the production in general. But I think we're going to dig a little bit deeper into how audio remote production is being done and may be done in the future. So, Katie, are you killing your screen? Oh, there you go. Well, that's me. Anyway, again, thanks for coming out this afternoon. Have a great bunch of people joining us for this. We're going to begin with a little bit of discussion of perspective from some of the console makers about use cases that they're imagining or the customers are asking for, that they're anticipating, features that they're adding to support that, and then go into a little bit of a discussion of the realities of literally working from home, which some people are doing in audio, and talk a little bit about that. And then we've asked Alex Judd from Sky to talk to us a little bit about what's happening in Europe and how audio production has really changed fairly significantly. And you know, I'll say it, but people have been saying it all year, that we've had a lot of change that has been precipitated by COVID, but we're now sort of seeing, we've broken up the constraints, and we're seeing sort of different ideas about how things will be done in the future, and some of the efficiencies we've discovered are really worth hanging on to. So there you go. Well, I think what I want to do is sort of start with Pete Walker and Christian Struck and Tom Knowles on the console side, and if we can just maybe, Christian, maybe just start with you. Is Lawo has a lot of technology. You've talked a lot about, you know, what is possible in terms of production virtualization, and I wonder kind of what are you seeing and what are customers asking for, and what ideas are kind of sticking?
Yeah. Okay. Welcome. Thank you, Roger. So yeah, we've been looking at those types of workflows for quite some years, and I realized that the very first time we have been effectively seen a major production or major part of a production happening remotely was 2014 during the Rio FIFA World Cup, and we had the second German television just splitting production control room and the venue and connecting that simply via, you know, a bunch of VLine remote force, audio and video. So nothing really, maybe at that time really significant, but not really a large scale or anything innovative from today's point of view. But ever since then, and by the way, this was the first date, we also had tests for long distance connections between surfaces and processing cores to see, and how the latency behaves, and how mixing feels when you really go over larger distances over IP networks. And ever since then, the requests and the workflow ideas of customers have changed and evolved, and we've adapted over time. And I think it's fair to say that we were lucky enough to have solutions ready when the pandemic finally made significantly more customers consider those type of workflows than it was the case before. And yeah, I mean, we've now in 2021, we have, I think it's the third or fourth major use case or case study, which we also published, by the way, where we have clients working probably the biggest example that I have here is the pan-European network, where we have production galleries and production control rooms in many different European countries, but all accessing resources that are centrally hubbed in two instances, or in two hubs in, I think it's London and Hilversum. So shared and mirrored between the both locations, so that there's a significant level of two location redundancy on the hardware side. And this is a very different workflow than the simple remote production workflow that we have seen, like, with Second German Television many years ago, because they do distributed production, which means, the gallery or the production control room and the audio control room can be in one place, the venue can be in another, and the resources that they remotely control, the processors, they are in a third location, and literally every combination between is possible. The resources are assigned dynamically, so there's nothing like a one-to-one or fixed relation between galleries and processors, and that that makes up for a huge amount of possibilities to utilize equipment and avoid downtime and flexibility in how you style your workflows. And yeah, we've made the necessary adaptations on the product side to allow for that. Certainly, you need to have all your gear being capable of dealing with rooted layer 3 networks. Otherwise, that's not going to work, independently whether you're talking hardware or software. And yeah, we've come up with a couple of solutions from very small to very big. So big meaning equally fully fledged consoles, but small meaning things like a simple touch front end that represents the console and then can be extended with a fader panel that probably most audio engineers have anyway, which comes from a workstation type of thing, etc. And yeah, the interest is pretty good, and we've seen that the pandemic really increased the need of those solutions, and we have many customers gratefully adopting them. Roger, you're on mute.
Audio guy. Sorry, I'll throw the same question to you, Pete, if you can. No, you're on mute.
Yeah, to be honest, it's pretty much exactly the same story here at CalRec for us as it is Christian at Lawo. It's basically a continuation of a theme that we've been on for 5 years plus now, probably longer. We started looking at these things for different reasons. So it's, the whole theory around the REMI, the RP1 products that we have, is about getting more for your money, having less downtime for your equipment, and dealing with those long haul connections, so you can mix a show back at your headquarters. But that exact same technology is fit for the wider purpose of just it. The key thing really is flexible connectivity. So people are making this work. The COVID pandemic has accelerated the people's desire for this kind of workflow. And it's no longer about just having an event remotely controlled, so you're not sending as much equipment and as much staff to that local site, but it's as you say, it's about distributing the production facility. So the location doesn't really matter anymore. So we're building on our product portfolio that's designed to be able to do exactly that. So the key things is that we need to be IT friendly. We need to be using standard protocols that IT guys like and can use. And Christian talks about routed layer 3 networks. That's really important as well. So a lot of the Sync 2110 stuff is obviously very focused at and we have to make sure that we're moving away from all that now, so that we're providing solutions that can connect across different subnets. So yeah, it's accelerated rapidly over the last 12 months. And one of the interesting points here as well is that people making this work with products that weren't necessarily designed to do that. So we've got some interesting use cases, their IP, their audio networking, but they weren't really intended to be used quite in this scenario. But we've got customers making it work. They're using Dante across public internet, using some clever code from their garages at home. And then we've got our new suite of products as well, obviously, which we very much designed to be specifically location agnostic and very IT friendly. So those are all coming on board now. We've got, there's a lady in France who works for BOB. She's been doing a lot of mixing from home using our Type R panels, combination of low cost, small fader panels that can be IP remote. She's got some connections, so she can monitor all that via 2110. That I can't really give too much detail about because for some reason everybody wants to be under NDA at the moment. But we're supporting many customers in just trialing and experimenting and building their confidence to work with these high latencies, East Coast processing cores on the West Coast. And what is interesting is that there doesn't seem to be one model fits all. People are talking about lots of different scenarios, whether it's having, you know, the traditional RP1 workflow that we came with, having your surface flipped as well, where people actually want the A1 at the venue where it's all happening, but they want the DSP processing to be remote. So yeah, it's all the key thing is just flexibility. Remove the location is no longer a barrier. Anybody can, as long as you can provide the connectivity. Our job is just to make it seamless as
What's
possible.
interesting, I mean, I get a sense.
As an A1, you may control it. Sorry, I was just going to say, as an A1, using technologies like RP1, you're getting into the realms of distributed DSP, because obviously one of the low latency mixers, so having small amounts of DSP dotted around providing solve up one or two RP1s, it's multiple RP1s, so you've got a single control surface effectively controlling lots of different DSP that's located in lots of different locations. But we need to make it, or we do make it, once it's configured and connected, it feels like you're doing a traditional broadcast.
Yeah. Well,
it's no different to doing a regular broadcast. I think I may have lost connectivity.
Pete, you were kind of going in and out there. I didn't know whether it was me or you. You know, it does sound like from what both of you are saying, it's sort of like all of the above right now. It's interesting. We'll get into a little bit later what of these things are going to stick. And Tom, from your perspective, you guys sort of in the System T built in a lot of this sort of in the basic design.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, from the kind of outset, that was what System T was designed to do in terms of networked devices, be them hardware boxes or the kind of software itself. Yeah, so I think the themes are very similar to Christian and Pete. It's kind of this move from the kind of on location type production where we'd send everything, including the console and the processing there, or the remote production where in our case, you'd send the processing engine and some control software and remotely connect to that from a console. And then the kind of newer use case, if you like, is the more distributed one and kind of the distributed control systems. So you might have a portion of the control shipping to the venue. So someone could set up or mix some sources there, but they might control that from a large surface sat in their broadcast center, or simultaneously they might have someone from home controlling that from the software running on a computer. And I guess an important aspect of that is the kind of collaborative control. Each of those control instances is a separate entity. It has separate things, so a separate selected path, a separate channel that you're dealing with. So you can all work at the same time without kind of stepping on each other's toes. That's a kind of lot of the use cases discussions we've been having and the kind of experiments people have been doing. And I think COVID has been the driver for that, but I see that people will use those models as they go forth into productions where people are still going on site in the same numbers.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, the idea of having multiple operators, or, you know, a distributed DSP seems to be important. And obviously, as Pete says, we've had RP1s for a while and other solutions. But that idea of maybe it needs to be dynamic, or that maybe a situation where if a link went bad, you'd like to be able to have somebody in a truck take over. And that's,
yeah,
you know,
I mean, it was hinted at the kind of a lot that drives the choices of the type of remote production is the connectivity you can expect between those sites. So if your connectivity out of a venue back to your hub is large, then yes, you can put all your DSP in your hub and bring all of your channels back from the venue back to the hub. If it's not, what you might want to do is send the DSP to the venue, and then you're kind of everything, the transmission is going from the venue, and there's no kind of sense of I'm bringing all the audio sources across the network, which could even be the internet. You're actually sending program kind of to air audio from the rack of kit at the venue as you would have if you sent an OB truck. And yeah, a second operator there with controllability is a good resilience model.
yeah.
Roger, if I can add to that,
Sure,
I
Christian.
think there is a very interesting observation. So first of all, I think, Tom, you're right. The trend was there before, and I think the very first project of that kind was realized already in 2018. So it was kind of way before COVID-19, and it was a large scale project where the customer did exactly this. They built like smaller vehicles in order to be able to cope with different connectivity to the venues, and sometimes with as Tom said, with bigger pipes, being able to have the processor centralized in a hub, but in some cases have a smaller vehicle with a processor on board be driving to the venue and then just remote controlling into the processing core, which is on the venue side. So again, this sounds a bit like the inverted way of a workflow, but we've seen all kinds of different flavors of that.
Do you see, Christian, do you see any of these things sticking more than, when it does it shake out to be a smaller number of use cases, or do any of these become dominant?
I think in the end it depends on the customer's expectation and workflow. Well, wouldn't say creativity, but what we see is that customers start with a principal backbone and architecture to support all of those, and try to evolve and elaborate or further define those workflows over time. So, for example, with that European project I was referring to, we have first of all we had production control rooms in all centralized in one city, and now they really have rolled it out across complete Europe, which means that the formerly international feed production that was centralized in one place is now equally distributed across Europe, just like the commentator part of that project, which basically means the 20 different languages they are producing, they were from scratch produced everywhere with remote access into centralized resources. And now for the international feed and the pan production, which is basically the delivery of multilingual feeds to all European local stations, is equally done in a distributed fashion. And I would say with the network and the backbone and the infrastructure allowing for it, it's basically up to the production and to the workflow creativity of the customer itself. We have seen all different things, and I couldn't say that one model becomes dominant over the others. With dynamic reallocation or with dynamic selection of processors and control rooms, just at the push of a button, you can just think of all sorts of scenarios, and there's basically no limits.
Well, so the question becomes, maybe a little bit. We're going to talk more about the cloud next month, and I think we're planning a forum for sometime in June to talk about the cloud, June 16th or something. But I just want to just quickly say, well, if all this is going to be distributed, is there an argument for it all being in the cloud? And assuming that you still need hard control surfaces, why shouldn't, and if all this connectivity is happening over network infrastructure, shouldn't maybe the console cores actually, and the distributed DSP, shouldn't that perhaps be in the cloud, or some of it be in the cloud? Christian, I'll let you, you're unmuted, I'll let you go, and then I'll throw the same question to Pete and Tom.
Well, I think it's a good question. We've had a similar discussion in Europe a couple of weeks ago, and I think I heard the friends from Calric say, well, yeah, why not in a couple of years? It's a question of, first of all, the trust and the scale that is needed. Trust in the technical solution and the scale of the solution for for the various purposes. What I can envision is, and we've seen that with our radio on-air products, where we have also a fully virtualized mixing solution. It is used for, I don't know what the English word is, a fourth tier type of sports production, where there is not really a commercial, a significant commercial, well, interest is maybe the wrong word, but where it's not the prime events. It's those events where where automated solutions are dominant, where automated cameras are already in use today, where we try to reduce cost as much as possible. And I've seen requests from customers for virtualized processing solutions for that sort of applications. In my opinion, for the prime events, being sport or entertainment, it will probably take a while until customers have the trust to have their processing core being absolutely not visible to them, and somewhere in the cloud. But probably it would be interesting to hear Tom's opinion, because the processing backend of effectively all processing cores is theoretically and technically virtualizable in a sense, and with the System T platform being natively IP designed as well. We're really interested to hear his thoughts on that.
Well, we'll let Pete take this hot potato first, and then we'll give Tom the last word on it here.
Yeah, so it seems there's a lot of interest in this. There's a lot of people approaching us talking about it. It seems to be the hot topic at the moment. Like Christian says, there's questions about the level of scale that you can do in the cloud. Obviously, at Calric, we're tied to FPGAs in our DSP technology. There's various different forms of cloud, whether you're talking about traditional Amazon Web Servers, or you're talking about a more private hosted sort of remote server center. Our processing cores are more than suitable to fit into that model. But if you're talking about true cloud and software-based processing, then that introduces some new challenges. But the desire is there from our customers, and they're getting these kind of services in other platforms from video providers as well. So the challenge is to start exploring that and seeing where we can go with it. But yeah, there's a lot of questions to be had about latency and scale and how we handle those things. And we've spent a lot of time over the last few years trying to remove proprietary methodologies. We don't want customers to feel tied into a given vendor. And as part of that, we need to continue in that vein and not get distracted by there's dangers in going into a cloud environment that you were moving away from that direction. So yeah, it's going to happen at some stage. Exactly how quickly we're going to migrate in that direction is a little bit up in the air. We are seeing people that are willing to risk things with low-cost software-based solutions that are fiddly. They're not so great to use. They're not necessarily reliable. I think people are waiting for broadcast manufacturers to step into that sort of area. But yeah, there's technical challenges that we need to work our way through to get there. So I still think that I think we're going to start seeing it soon, but it's going to be debatable as to how quickly that becomes a norm. And I still think there's going to be a desire for bespoke broadcast hardware that's dedicated for the job for quite a few years to come. Yeah.
That's interesting. I mean, we've had master control in the cloud for a long time, and I guess the stuff that people like Eurosport do, where it's very simple integration. They're adding an announce commentary over a NAT sound. That's happened in the cloud for a long time. And as you say, Pete, vMix and stuff like that, very simple. But it's interesting to see how it's accelerated on the video production side for VizRT and Grass Valley and other people. Tom?
Well, one of the things our customers don't necessarily understand, some of them at least, is you know, you talk about doing it with video, and it's becoming a reality. And video is such high data rates, so people sometimes struggle to understand why audio can't follow in the soup. But you know, it's because GPUs are designed to process lots of pixels, and whilst there's a lot of data, the frame rates are quite low and the channel counts are quite low. When you're doing when you've got 1,000 channels of audio at you know 48,000 samples a second, it's a different challenge. And I don't think people necessarily, on the face of it, understand why the audio should be a bit more of a challenge than the video in that respect.
Yeah, yeah. Tom, you're on.
So Christian kind of alluded to the fact that System T's Tempest engine is x86 based, so it is CPU based from the outset. That's its processing engine. So from a kind of pure computing and cloud point of view, I think that's kind of there. That's part of it. So I guess it flips back on the kind of applications and the solution engineering side of it. And I think that cloud is the logical next step to the centralized approach. So we're talking about these remote production kind of methodologies, the remote controlled, the centralized with distributed control, that thing. So if your centralization is in a hub, my personal view is the logical next step is that is in a cloud. So that kind of makes sense, and that is fine. The choice there is about what type of event you're doing. Exactly like these different remote production scenarios, as Christian said, are all necessary. The optimum is having products, hardware and software that support all of them, and letting people design solutions around those products that fit the requirements of the show. Well, the same is said for cloud processing. So in terms of usage cases, I can see a kind of clear example of if you have multiple venues, so it's something that goes on throughout the day that happens at multiple like venue locations, you can bring that signal through the cloud anyway. You're possibly bringing it through the cloud to get it back to your production hub. So deploying processing in the cloud is a logical next step. As Pete said, there are things like latency to deal with. There are things like that. So they become the problems of remote production, but in a slightly different kind of mold. They're kind of the same problems as you have, but there. So question of time, who knows? We will wait and see. But it's definitely something that people are talking to us about. And I see it as the logical step for the kind of centralized hub type production.
Great. Well, thanks, Tom. I think the question really is if the rest of the production for whatever class of production it is going to be in the cloud, then does the audio stay in the ground? And that's sort of where we are with esports, is it's all gone up to the cloud, and they started with simple solutions like vMix. Now they have starting to use more sophisticated solutions from Grass Valley and others. And so if the rest of the production is in the cloud, does the audio stay with sort of a legacy on the ground infrastructure, or does it move up? And the theme here, as everybody's pointed out, has been different. There are different use cases for everything, and it may or may not be appropriate to be in the cloud. But I got to think that for some people who are the rest of the shows in the cloud, they're going to want to be in the cloud. So there you go. Glenn, we're going to get to you in a second. So Christian, I understand you got a sick kid at home. We appreciate your sticking around. You can stick around or buzz out whenever you want, but thank you, all three of you. It's been great.
Pleasure.
Yep.
Thank you.
Glenn, you've been doing a little bit of work in the cloud, and I think with some of the freelance stuff that you do outside Pac-12, and also your consideration of Pac-12. But I think one of the realities, and you know, Pete referred to it, but people are working at home, and we've supported talent now through and directors and everything else through sort of remote monitoring over the internet, over the public internet, and that's something that I think everybody's familiar with, but perhaps is less familiar with the fact that people have been doing audio from home for a long time over the public internet and remote controlling stuff like vMix. Tell us a little bit about what that workflow is.
Well, I think one thing, you know, for the entire group, and as we discuss this whole virtualization, whether it be as centralized or decentralized, there are the 3 C's, as I like to call them. It's the connectivity, the contribution, and the control. So once those 3 basic things are taken care of, then you can do any of these centralized or non-centralized productions. In the cloud, I think we started, I mean, there's been DAWs around in the cloud for quite a while. You know, some guys were starting out with Reaper, which was a cloud-based product that you could just download off the internet. And then we got to vMix, and that kind of, at least during the COVID era, that really took off. You know, when I was working from home, mixing, these were these smaller shows, as smaller than what Christian described even. And these types of shows were easily done. It's very easy to do them. Esports obviously took off with doing things in the cloud because they're all cloud-based to begin with. You know, those game engines are all running somewhere and everyone connects to them. As far as mixing from home, it was kind of put together really fast, and some of us were just grabbing stuff out of our garage to put it together. We used vMix in the cloud successfully for lots of different productions. They were setting up instances of vMix on AWS at different hubs, at different AES or AWS hubs, from the East Coast to the West Coast, and they were running multiple instances of them in one production. So for audio, the audio and the TD shared an instance, the tape operator shared an instance, and there was a third transmission instance that we used. As far as doing the audio, it's as simple as, you know, having this instance running and taking that stereo output from whatever team viewer or the DVC. I think AWS has their version of a team viewer, which works quite well. And you were just running this app in the cloud, and you could connect your control surface, which a lot of us went through a lot of different control surfaces before we found the one we liked. I think a lot of us ended up with some Behringer gear that we were able to manipulate. And then we found other apps that were able to remotely control what our control surface was doing in vMix. So that went on for a while. We were doing, I think, a couple of the companies that we connected to between me and Dana were doing probably 6 or 7 shows a week during the pandemic, which was quite a lot. They would do multiple shows a day for lots of different clients. And these were mostly those simple shows. It wasn't hard to mix. It was mostly talking heads and maybe some music and some tape playback. And, I had, my Behringer was running, 8 faders, and I was probably using 3. That's how simple these were. But,
Right.
but I was controlling a instance in the cloud,
Right.
which from a financial standpoint makes a lot of sense, because you spin it up when you need it and you spin it down when you're not using it. So that was kind of the start. And I think that led to the Grass Valley kind of system with EA, and which is leading to other things down the road.
And we'll get to that next month. But I think the point is that just sort of using the same Unity Connect monitoring and whatnot, the same thing. And I don't know, like here's a.
Yep. There's
Dana's setup.
Yep.
And is that that's a
pretty
Behringer or
Behringer? There's a Stream Deck control for IFB interrupt and comms via Unity intercom. That's pretty much what they look like.
Yeah. Now, Dana is also. Sorry, never mind. I guess, Glenn, if we can jump, I just want to jump over to Mike. If you're there, Mike.
I am here. Hello, everybody.
Hi, Mike. How's it going?
It's going well. Interesting to hear everybody's perspectives and what they've been doing.
All right. Mike, you're not going to Japan, right? You stay here.
No, I go to Japan.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah, not quite as early as Carl, but I'm 2 weeks behind Carl. So I'm the second
wow.
wave. Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, gearing up. But yeah, just voicing more of what everybody's saying. I think talking about mixing at home, and Glenn, your point of simple and making things work from a garage. That's what I did. It was, we went dark. NBC Sports went dark on March 14th, and it was about a week of figuring it out. And then April 1, we not only were back on the air, but back on the air with a new show. We launched the show with an entire remote team, and I think I can share my setup.
Yeah, share your George Lucas sponsored.
Yeah. Let me see if I can portion of this. I don't know.
Share your screen.
Yeah. Hang on. Basic share, desktop. Share
window.
There we go. Trying to do this here. It's blocking me out, Roger. I might just email it to you. Yeah, it's I was grabbing stuff from my garage, getting it work. We had the whole NBC Sports building, so it was kind of, we were all pointed at one thing, and we launched a new show and trying to get everybody's connectivity at home.
You were doing a show, same thing, multi-viewer,
exactly.
And using CalRec Connect, I guess, on a tablet.
Yep.
And yeah, I don't know. I guess I probably.
So I just sent you that, Roger. Hopefully it comes through.
Oh, no. Now it's on me. Talk while
mine kind of blanked out there. It's not letting me share for some reason. Okay, so yeah, we kind of spun everything up there. Unity Connect to bring back monitoring over VLC was interesting. We just really took advantage of everything that was already up and running in our facility. And then it worked so well and with such ease that I was able to, when we did start to come back, I just dropped off all the equipment I had to a different operator, and we kept him home for the last year. He has not come back in the building. He's been doing these talking head type shows just from home, managing our equipment with an RTS panel. He controls the Enco remotely, just VPN on into the building network, and he got access to everything. We can build shows from home. It's worked really, really well. There's some control that we didn't have, but we got up and running, and then it was about scaling it. And it's come through, and we've kept multiple operators home, submixing events. We submixed Premier League games. We've submixed hockey games from home, all controlling surfaces that are already in our building. So we used an iPad to control the CalRecs that we have, and it worked really, really well. Shockingly, I think to everybody's surprise, and that's kind of how we did. And then it was scaling it up. We used Tie-Line gateways, Tie-Line products, the vias and the gateways to send out to all our announcers because they were home, and a lot of them stayed home. Doc called the Stanley Cup Finals from home. So it was a big process of, we thought we were gonna just get by, and we haven't. We've just scaled these things to do more and more and more and more, and it's really just grown beyond all that. From the, I don't know if you have the picture yet, Roger.
Yeah, I do, and it's kind of impressive, all the, because you've got a router and you've got an intercom, and hold on a second, let me just share this and quit talking about it. Hold on a second, share screens. There we go. That's you.
There it is. There's my guest bedroom with all my Star Wars toys. Router head. That's Enco running on my iPad, which is just controlling the Enco.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that's a Enco Hotshot running on an iPad. It felt really familiar. The JBLs and half of that stuff. I think Dana and I have the same interface we ended up using. We've probably both had it next to us for playing music. And that's how we got up and running. I ended up using Isotope Hawkeye. I think that's what that app is.
Right.
To do loudness and just keep a good monitor on things. And that's just a multi-viewer coming back. And then it spun up as 2 talking heads, 3 talking heads. 7.
These are simple shows.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah.
And then the bigger thing about that is we've scaled. We started that way, and then we've kind of scaled it. So Pete was talking about the RP1, and what was, again, now that during COVID times, it went from being simple uses of the RP1 to now to do the shows, we're maxing out the RP1 on every show and figuring out ways to use the Hydra network to bring things back instead of through the CalRec. So it's been a big learning process and a creative stuff, but we've definitely adopted a lot of this workflow and a little bit nicer design than you currently are looking at. But
well, we'll kill this slide.
Yeah, worked well.
But you know, you mentioned the RP1, and it's worth saying that there are probably maybe 8. There'll be 8 control rooms that are in Stanford. 8, something like that. You have a bunch of trucks in the loading dock, and all of your control rooms busy, and most of those will be connected to RP1s in Japan, and I guess also even maybe Telemundo and other people, or 30 Rock will be doing they're similar.
Everybody's kind of pointing at them, and whereas originally we were using them for just studio shows, getting mics to IFBs, they've really, as we've used them more and more, we're doing full venues, REMC, smaller venues with this equipment. And we did Triple Crown horse races through an RP1, where I didn't go to the Preakness. I did the Preakness from Stanford, and fighting a few things here and there. Most of the problems were a couple delay issues, but we got it knocked out by air, and we were just missing the fans, really. I didn't feel any different from when I've gone to do it on ND1 versus being in Stanford.
Yeah. Well, and it's not like you got a whole lot of crowd anyway.
Yeah.
The rich guys are in the clubhouse, and well, that's excellent. That's really cool. Well, I appreciate it. Glenn, any last thoughts here before we move on?
I
think
home. I like what Pete said about staying with kind of a standardization across the back end. That's really important, but this is only going to get bigger. Christian talked about the smaller trucks going out, and the smaller trucks will go out and will do bigger shows. That's kind of my prediction.
Well, that's why I think we're going to transition to Alex and talk a little bit about, I really, in some of the conversations that I've been in with Alex and other people or listened into in the last couple of months, I really kind of have the sense that this has evolved in some fairly distinct ways in Europe and particularly in the UK, and maybe even faster than it's evolving here. So, Alex, thanks for everybody on your end for taking this call late in the day. Nice to see you.
And you.
So what do you think? I mean, you guys talk about there's a truck now that's sort of like in Premier League, there's a truck that sort of make a contribution point, and then you're bringing multi-channel audio back. Go through that topology, and what are your thoughts about how this is evolving?
So I mean, kind of what we kind of go back to kind of the beginning where kind of we started looking at remote in the terms of kind of away from venue remote. We actually started out doing the F1, which was kind of like quite a big template for kind of how to do the other productions. And that effectively kind of involved shipping pods around the world with a managed secure network between Sky and the pod. And then effectively we had utilised RP1s and consoles connected to those in order to kind of create the in-ears mixes locally. And then that kind of way of working has kind of ended up kind of translating into kind of like the future kind of workflows that we've kind of implemented on EFL, Premier League, and now the cricket that we're literally just building at the moment. So the kind of evolution of that really has kind of been gradual, but I think a lot of the kind of fundamentals were kind of laid with that kind of initial kind of footsteps into how the systems were built, really, to facilitate those initial productions that we were doing on the F1. So on that, we'd have something like, I think we've got 48 four wires connected over the network on that system back to our intercom system at Sky, and how effectively that has just kind of bridged the gap between how we've done that production to basically now how we're doing all of our remote OBs. But it's kind of scaled to a point now where we've got multiple RP1s, multiple trucks, and we're kind of bringing in more audio feeds over J2Ks and MADI connects over the networks, basically. So there are kind of parts that you'd kind of want to have more intelligence over the network, and there are kind of parts that are maybe kind of like, they work okay for how we're kind of delivering content and feeds at the moment, but we kind of want to kind of have more out of it. I think the longer term ambition, as I kind of wanted to chip into the conversation earlier, but the kind of concepts around being able to kind of move the kind of DSP processing from kind of venue to on-prem to cloud. I think all of that kind of side of how we imagine the systems to work are kind of pivotal, kind of really. I also think that the kind of way that I kind of particularly look at it at the moment is like, I think the connectivity piece is kind of drives like the thought process around how we want to or how we kind of define that workflow, whether we want to kind of do it in do the DSP on site or part of it in on-prem or in the cloud.
So what kind of for, let's say for Premier League, what do you see sort of sticking? I mean, it's kind of after we get past the pandemic, or as we're getting past the pandemic, hopefully, you have good connectivity to the site, you're bringing more channels back. Yeah. So does the idea of a broadcast center hub then become?
I think that absolutely, in my mind, is something that will stick, because it's it kind of makes sense from lots of different points of view. And I think the kind of point of view of kind of people being able to kind of travel to a central hub to make television kind of makes sense from a content creation point of view, and also kind of a facilities point of view. That obviously there's efficiencies within kind of the way that the facilities are used, because you get more out of it being kind of centralized. Really, you can fit different productions in after one another in those facilities, so they're kind of getting used more. And then also from a point of view of kind of getting people kind of trained up, and then kind of learning within that environment, we're kind of able to kind of structure things in a way where there is kind of a similarity in the way that the way that we're putting together the systems works.
Yeah. And in some cases, though, also, I guess we've seen a little bit of that, those facilities being built by third parties, right? I mean,
yeah,
NEP in Europe and others have sort of built facilities that are for hire, but they're sort of centralized production hubs. Paul, what do you think? Do you see yourself designing hubs, or do you see? Obviously, you've supported a ton of Game Creek has supported a ton of this sort of virtualized production for clients like Fox and stuff like that, where a lot of the stuff is being done in Los Angeles, but there's a truck on site. You know, where do you think this is? Where do you think this is going? And I guess part of your job is just saying yes to everything, but
that is absolutely our job. Whatever the client wants, you know.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are here. And you know, and that, honestly, that's one of the difficulties is Fox with HRP, ESPN with Grimmy's. We're doing all these different things, and we have our own that Jason has developed called GCV Anywhere, so we can do whatever we want. And what's interesting is lately, now that people, I mean, I live in Oklahoma, so things have been pretty open anyway. But now that things are opening up other places, I'm hearing some of our clients talk about just getting back in the truck. I mean, we didn't go smaller. We added more trucks just to spread people out, and then also spread people to their houses or to their facilities. I'm just not sure yet where it's going to end up. And I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to see, you know, what are we as Game Creek going to do? How are we going to take care of our clients? And I'm not sure right now where that goes. I think I told you earlier. It's like I'm here at home right now, and I've got Scott Verplank. He's the one announcer for the PGA, and he's doing announcing for the PGA from my theater room. And because I've got decent internet, but I'm using ESPN gear to do it. So, and we did the same thing back in for the Masters using Game Creek Anywhere. But where's it going to end up? I don't know. It's still a moving target, and it's hard to see where it goes.
yeah, it's interesting.
I would just add to what to what Paul just offered. You know, virtually everything we did with GCV Anywhere was reacting to the need of some client. You know, CBS in particular really drove us. You know, they needed a solution very quickly for college football for remote production that didn't involve audio at the outset. But the Masters, 2 Masters ago, you know, they didn't have a solution, and they needed one in a hurry. So we, on the back of the system we put together for them for college football, we did 9 remote announce positions. And that worked out pretty well, but it's not something that we had as a product until someone said to us, we need this, you know, yesterday. So that's how it evolved, and that's how just about everything has evolved so far. Now we're sort of getting to a point where we're all kind of taking a look around and saying, all right, what's next? What are we going to do now? And how much of this lives on? And we're just kind of waiting and seeing. You know, we'll see what happens in the fall with college football, and whether or not our friends at CBS want to go to the venues again, or if they're going to continue to stay remote. You know, it's a big open question right now.
Right. Well, Jason, it's you know, it's interesting. And CBS went after this pretty aggressively. I think maybe more than anybody else in terms of doing this. But and you guys have done some testing with CalRec with having a console control surface. I think we had a picture of it earlier, and there's no reason that all can't work. We've gotten all those tools working. What's the biggest, I mean, Alex, where you have great connectivity and everything, what's the biggest, what's the biggest problem? And, you talked a little bit about 4 wires and stuff like that. Like what in England, in the UK, you have great dark fiber and all that. What really is the biggest problem? Is it latency or is it shit like intercom?
Well, I think that the kind of the biggest challenges really are kind of just come around kind of dealing with almost the amount of kind of work that you've got to put in to kind of line everything up, basically, to make sure everything's kind of working in the kind of manner that you expect it to. So I think there's kind of challenges around that sometimes, just in kind of like how we kind of want to kind of progress the production and basically our scheduling of how we do things. Sometimes it means that we might have quite tight turnarounds on things. So there is always like time pressures in the kind of way we do it. But overall, I think the latency side of it it's there. It's an inherent thing within the network, and we kind of we deal with that. I think on other productions it's more of a challenge where you haven't got great connectivity, or you're on the other side of the planet. Then it does become more of a challenge, partly in terms of kind of reaction times of fader movements that translate into kind of other fader movements on a RP1, for instance, might mean that when you're kind of fading a queue up from the other side of the planet, the latency of the link, someone might think they're not faded up in time. So there are challenges around that, which can be kind of evident, but I think that's probably the bulk of it, really. I mean, intercom, I think intercoms can be a challenge, generally speaking, anyway, at times, depending on kind of like how people kind of prefer to use the systems. So I think a lot of that's kind of down to like preference of how the systems are used in terms of like point-to-point communications versus party line or that type of thing, really.
You have situations though where you have a truck at the venue and you're supporting 2 different rights holders or multiple rights holders through that same truck, and intercom through that, and talent at the venue. And that's probably a little bit, I think the talent at the venue is the thing that makes latency an issue. If the talent is back at the broadcast center, or if they're just phoning it in, then it doesn't matter, or latency is less of an issue.
I mean, that's something that hasn't really kind of come up as a major irritation, I think, more than a kind of adaptation of kind of how people have responded to kind of working, and even more so when we've kind of been working with stuff in the cloud recently. That's kind of, I'm surprised how people have adapted to it so well, to be honest with you. Like the latency of some of the kind of parts of that system sometimes. I mean, the communication's always kind of relatively quick because in the UK, because we haven't got, so far, so many different network hops to get through. So generally speaking, it's not so much of an issue, really.
Right.
The communications for talent anyway. I mean, obviously you have to give the in-ear cue off of a local mix. So how you derive that, whether it's done off of a pre-fade listen on the console or RP1, depending on scale of production, really.
Right. Henry Rousseau, are you there?
Yeah, Roger, I'm here.
2 other meetings.
Yeah.
Right. Good. What do you think? Where is this going, Henry? And where in your long-term plans? You know, you were kind of early innovator in doing REMI workflows. You've done a ton of remote talent, and that seems like that's something that's here to stay. You've been interested in remoting the audio mixers. You've talked about hubbing the EVS operators. What do you kind of where do you think that this is going for? What's the dominant workflow for ESPN if you have a crystal ball?
Well, I'll tell you, I think first of all, kudos to the manufacturers for stepping up and reacting as fast as they have, especially since the start of COVID. And even though all of the remote control access are things that we've been talking about for many years, the fact that it came to fruition under a lot of duress, let's just say, to get the product on the air, I think hats off to them, because I without that type of connectivity, I don't think we would have been able to succeed in continuing the broadcasts of the sporting events. But listening to everybody, I mean, hearing what Paul was just talking about, yeah, there's a lot of innovation going on, and I think COVID, all of the savings that were realized from keeping talent at home, keeping the crews at home, is kind of spilling over. I think what we're going to see, and my opinion, is that they're still going to have on-site full-blown productions with all of the major events, as much as we can support. But for the scaled-down events, I think you're going to see a continuation of the live from home aspect of integrating talent, and then remote controlling of the various consoles. The idea that what Glenn has been doing, Alex has been doing, remote controlling at home, that's been great for to get the product on the air. But what I envision at some point is the hub approach, where you can build a more robust, redundant type systems that can service an area, general area. And as much as we all like traveling and sleeping in hotels, I think working maybe an 8-10 hour day and doing a couple of games and then driving home at night and being back with your family, I think that might be something that we can look forward to doing again on the lower class games. That would also allow, I think, a great way of introducing some of the younger mixers and the newer techs that are coming up that are probably more tech savvy from an IT perspective, but need to get the stick time for an audio console. And I think that would be actually a great training tool. But I think that's kind of where I see it. It's still going to be a combination of full-blown remote productions, but also with a large presence of the live from home and remote technologies.
Great.
Fantastic. Sorry, I was just jumping in there, Roger. Sorry, I was just going to say, I think I can echo that in terms of kind of, I don't think that traditional OBs will kind of cease to exist, but there'll definitely be times where that will be kind of key to use a traditional OB, whether it's in terms of connectivity or just for kind of the general kind of production kind of element of that. I think there will still be a requirement for that. So.
Well, and that's an interesting point too. And just I guess from a business standpoint, that in terms of positioning and whatnot, a truck may have few people in it one day and then the next day need to be somewhere, right? Paul, Jason, is that?
Well, and that's, you know, just like, you know, when everything started going HD, we had to do both types of shows. And now we still have to provide a truck. You know, here we provide a truck that's got all the, you know, it has a big CalRec audio console in it, but we're doing a small show. Maybe we don't need that big, but we have to go for the big tier show, the A+, the A level, whatever show. I know, and you were talking about Dana, you know, I don't think we actually showed a picture. We actually had a CalRec Sigma, I think it was.
Artemis.
Artemis. It was an Artemis at his house. And we did a connectivity test with that and ready to move forward, but you've got to have a client who's willing to, or needs to, actually it's more like needs to make that move. You know, it's like, why make the move? Why take the chance of doing it that way if they don't need to? And so that's the reason that like Jason said with the Game Creek Anywhere, that came about because of somebody's need. And we just morphed to it. But
let me see if I have a picture of, hold on a second. Bear with me.
In some cases, you know, like with announcers, it's easy to ship those kits around and set something up for them. It's not as easy to ship a CalRec Apollo around to somebody's house to let them have a Surface or a Grass Valley switcher. You know, the two things that end up staying in the truck right now are audio and TD. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there's a small Artemis frame. But if somebody was going to be mixing a game every week,
right?
The point is,
but then it's not a. Let's say you're going with something like this. You're using one of your top level guys to do this. You're not necessarily using a new guy who's learning.
Yeah,
you're going to your guy who knows it all at this point.
Well, I would see if I was Fred Aldis or something, and I was sick of being on the road, that maybe this would be a transition for me.
Fred was sick of being on the road about 20 years ago.
Yeah, I'd put one of these in my basement and, you know, go, okay, I'll mix a game a week. You know, I don't know. But, you know, who knows? Who knows? Anyway, stop sharing that. There you go. Well, it's interesting. It's interesting to see where it's see where it's all going. It feels like what we've heard from everybody, clearly from manufacturers, but it's sort of an all of the above. And Alex, you mentioned something about training, which is interesting, though. I mean, you've had more operators. This really ends up taking more operators because you've kind of got an A1 in the truck, and then you've got people back at the broadcast center. So in terms of personnel, this hasn't necessarily been any savings of personnel for things like Premier League or.
I think kind of on that side of it, I think when you have to kind of look at the whole kind of picture really, in terms of kind of how this kind of all goes together, in order to kind of work that out. And I think there are because of the kind of nature of the design, I think it's actually kind of not massively increased, if at all.
And less travel and less time sitting in the car stuck on a freeway. Motorway,
yeah.
Sorry.
So, but actually kind of people kind of there physically on the day, yes, but not so over the extended period of time, if that makes sense.
Well, you mentioned, you know, the other thing you mentioned quickly was training. And
yeah,
this is something even in the old days when some networks ran their own remote operations, then you had this sort of cycling through the broadcast center, and you had a sort of training, collegial training and formal training. And just expand on that, sort of the advantages of the hub in terms of training.
Well, I mean, obviously COVID's kind of made things kind of slightly difficult in terms of kind of social distancing, but the kind of ethos and the mindset around it was, you know, I think kind of if you're kind of looking at a centralized hub for your production, then you can control that kind of environment. People are more in tune with it, where it's kind of physically able to go and look at those systems that are kind of online or in an area that's not necessarily on air all the time. Whereas if you were kind of having to send somebody out to look at a particular production, then they would either kind of have to be following the truck around for several weeks with hotels and everything else. Whereas if you had kind of more downtime or time to do training at base,
Easier to shadow somebody. Yeah.
And the system's there the whole time. So if there's any time where, you know, you've got any spare time, you could go and look at it and kind of interrogate how it works more so than if you get a finite time out on the road looking at it.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, interesting. Well, I think this has been a fantastic discussion. I just, you know, thank everybody for helping put this together. Anybody have any last comments they want to throw in? Anybody? Otherwise, I think we'll wrap it up here. As I mentioned, we're going to kind of get together next month, and you'll get some mail about it, but get together in June to talk a little bit more about cloud audio and what's happening. And there really has been a lot, and some of the work that ASG and other people have been doing with integrating sort of more sophisticated solutions here. There has been a lot of work on that, and so we'll plan to sort of talk about that specifically next month. But
yeah, I can say, you know, one of the questions that I put in there. One of the questions I put in there was, you know, I work with SMPTE and AES a lot with all the SMPTE standards for 2110, and I've seen a lot of I've seen very slow implementation of that, and I just put a question in there to see if anybody is like getting into that, and the appliances are now here for that, and you know the stuff is incredible what it does, and I just want to see if anybody's had any experience implementing that. I know that that you know, so I always want to see if anybody has any.
Well, and you missed, Jeff. I think the console guys talked about that a lot too. That how kind of being stuff that's IP friendly is very helpful in making all this work.
Especially if the cloud, and because we're planning on building a 2110 truck for next year.
Yeah. I mean, is that a fair? Anybody want to jump into that question? But I think that's a sort of a big part of making this stuff work easily.
Well, so we have like 9 IP trucks now, and 7 of them are all 2110, and we are definitely using 2110 into the consoles that now, and it's helped us more for when we bring trucks together for a large event like the PGA that we're doing right now, or at the Masters. That it's helped us there more than it has for the remote areas. The remote, everything else is not, you know, you're using Unity Connect, you're using High Vision for video, you know, these different things, but I don't, and we're trying to do all of this over the, you know, the open internet, not dark fiber if we can. And so that's where I think that the using 2110 and all of it that way has been best for when we're hooking trucks together on site or even in the same area.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And that may be a little different in Europe, where there is more dark fiber. I don't know, Alex, if you have any thoughts on that.
It's definitely something that kind of seems like it's kind of the future, kind of for the way that the industry is probably going to go, really, in terms of connectivity for trucks and to venue, really. I think it would open up lots of opportunities for the way that we can kind of connect up DSP, and how the kind of connectivity piece will kind of align how the productions and the controllers or operators of those bits of equipment want to operate. So the kind of ideals of how we want to operate with like adding on the additional DSP to our systems, and just kind of connecting in and things kind of seamlessly working is kind of like where I think everyone wants to get to. But That's kind of not quite within grasp, it seems to me. But, it's definitely kind of on the roadmap.
Work in progress in the real world.
Yeah.